Bonjour and welcome to Scouting for Growth. I am Sabine VdL, thrilled to launch a bold new series exploring something with a certain je ne sais quoi for innovators, the venture client model. My question is the following. Are you ready to rethink how corporates and startups work together? I hope so, because this venture client concept is turning corporate innovation on its head. Instead of merely investing in startups and crossing fingers, big companies buy from startups to drive innovation. Today, not years from now. Sounds intriguing, right? Imagine a world where a major Fortune 500, an automotive manufacturer, an insurance giant, or a bank can plug in a cutting-edge startup solution as easily as adding a new app to your phone. No endless equity deals, no maybe someday payoffs, just real tech solving real problems. Now, what if your company's next breakthrough isn't built in-house, but bought from a startup in an early pilot? What if being a startup's customer is more powerful than being its investor? These are the questions we will be tackling. Spoiler alert, the venture client approach is catching fire across industries. It even landed on Gartner's Hype Cycle as a top innovation practice in 2024. In fact, corporate innovation programs worldwide are projected to top $150 billion by 2025, and an estimated 195 companies, mostly in Europe, have already embraced venture clienting. C'est énorme. So pour yourself a café au lait, mes amis, because we are diving into why this model matters, especially for insurance and other regulated sectors where innovation can feel so slow sometimes, like molasses. Let's start with the basics. What on earth is a venture client model, and why does it matter for corporate innovation? At its core, a venture client is a corporation that purchases and uses a startup solution to gain strategic benefit. No equity stakes, no controlling shares, just buying the solution early when the startup is still a venture. Think of it this way. The company becomes the startup's client, often the first or an early client, giving the startup revenue and feedback, while the corporate gets to solve a problem with a cutting-edge product. It flips the usual script, right? Instead of investing in 10 startups and hoping one succeeds, you pay a startup to solve a problem and start benefiting immediately. Why does this matter? Because traditional corporate venturing think like CVCs, corporate venture capital, or incubators. Often, those move too slowly or deliver too few tangible results to fulfill the need of a big corporation. For example, a typical CVC fund might invest in maybe 5 startups per year if it is big, often less if it is small. That is nice, right? But big companies face hundreds of problems and opportunities that startups could tackle. 5 startups a year just don't cut it. As Gregor Gimi, who pioneered the venture client model, realized during his time at BMW, relying only on equity investments means you're missing out on dozens of other great startups that could be helping your business. The raison d'être of the venture client model is to scale up scale-ups and startups adoption. And the reason why at Alchemy Crew we are building adoption labs. Not one or two pilots, but dozens, even hundreds of startup collaborations, all focused on solving business challenges. In Gregor's case, he wanted BMW to leverage 50 plus startups a year, not 5. Let me use Gregor's own vivid analogy. Do you buy equity in BMW or do you buy the car? If you buy BMW stock, great. But it won't put a car in your driveway. To drive the car, you have to buy the car. Likewise, if a corporate wants a startup's innovation, the car, buying a small equity stake in the startup is indirect. You only get real value when you buy the product and use it. That is the venture client philosophy in a nutshell. Don't just invest, use. Gimme recounts how in 2014, 2015 at BMW, he realized the ultimate goal wasn't owning a piece of a startup, but getting the strategic benefits from using its technology. So he skipped the investment step and positioned BMW as a client of startups, coining the term venture client for his early customer approach. The venture, the startup, the client is a corporate. Et voila! The BMW Startup Garage was born in 2015 as the first client or venture client unit, proving this model could work. Now, fast forward today, companies like Bosch, Roche, Airbus, AXA, Ergomunic Re, and Zurich Insurance, among the few, have all adopted venture client principles, especially in insurance and finance, where companies must innovate under heavy regulation. The venture client approach is a godsend. Why? Because it lets these big firms pilot new technologies quickly without huge commitments, all while staying compliant. Indeed, instead of investing millions and waiting years, an insurer can run a controlled 3-month pilot with a startup solution, say an AI fraud detection or a health tech app, under a lightweight contract. If it works, they integrate it and scale up. If not, they have lost only a little time and money, not a fortune. This agility is pure gold in regulated industry where lengthy procurement and caution are the norm. As one financial services innovator put it candidly at a roundtable I attended recently, my pain point is integration into corporate processes versus speed. Venture client programs are the bridge to that gap, giving corporates a fast track to work with startups while managing compliance and risk responsibly. And make no mistake, this isn't just theory, it is happening right now. Big insurers are building internal startup engine to scout, test, adopt startup solution continuously. This is the same for bank, automotive companies. In doing so, they inject fresh technology into everything from underwriting and claims to customer service and beyond. The model turns the corporation into what I like to call an innovation magnet, attracting the best startups because the world is out. This company loves to buy new tech. Remember, for a startup, landing a large corporate client is like finding a unicorn. So, corporates known as active venture clients become partners of choice for top startups, which in turn helps the corporate get first dibs on the really best technologies that are out there. It is a virtuous circle, or as Gregor Gimi cheekily says, a venture client cuts out the middleman. In fact, he argues that a traditional corporate VC is basically just a bad venture client process. All the same step, but indirect. Ouch! I have lots of friends in the VC world and CVC space, and I would say there are some that are doing pretty well. But Whether you agree or not, it underscores how revolutionary this approach is in the corporate innovation toolkit. Next, let's shine a spotlight on the pioneer of this model, Gregor Gimi. Gregor says, buy, don't invest. If the venture client model were a novel, Gregor would be our protagonist, the visionary who challenges corporate orthodoxy. His story has become almost legend in innovation circles. Picture Munich, circa 2012. Gregor, fresh from Silicon Valley, joins BMW's innovation strategy team. You find that BMW, like many corporates, is barely scratching the surface of what startups offer. Sure, they had a corporate VC arm, but it was investing maybe 2 to 5 startups per year. Gregor's reaction? Ce n'est pas possible. Not nearly enough to cover the myriad of technological challenges and opportunities in a huge company like BMW. He initially tried to tweak the venture capital approach. What if BMW made lots of tiny investment like a Y Combinator model? But he hit a wall. BMW's HQ told him, paraphrasing, if we invest in 50 startups per year, in 5 years, we would have 250 equity stakes to manage. Impossible for us. And guys, I am an investor and I have a portfolio of 30 startups. I will tell you, impossible to manage, and it's why I become an LP in one insurtech fund instead. In a regulated, process-heavy enterprise, managing a large equity portfolio was a non-starter. So, Gregor flipped the script. He asked a simple yet radical question. What if we skipped investing and just worked with startups as vendors? After all, the whole point is to get the technology into BMW's cars or operations, right? Why not go straight to that? That is what the light bulb went off. Gregor realized the goal of corporate venturing is not ownership, but usage, obtaining strategic benefits by using the startup technology. You don't need an equity stake to do that, as he famously explained. Being a customer yields the value you are after. Investment is optional. So he introduced a new model. BMW as a client of startups. In 2015, he launched the BMW Startup Garage, especially the first venture client unit in the world. Its mission, to find top startups worldwide and integrate this solution into BMW's business fast. This was bold at the time, and I remember at the time I actually moved from fintech to insurtech and built my first accelerator. So I wasn't well on my journey of learning what venture clienting is now 10 years forward. It means convincing internal stakeholder that buying from a tiny startup could be as important as multi-million dollars deals with established suppliers. It meant crafting new processes, a light procurement, legal and IT onboarding tailored for startup pilots. Gregor coined the term venture client to give this approach an identity. And it worked. BMW Garage went on to source dozens of startups that helped BMW innovate, from new materials to AI systems, all without BMW taking equity. Gregor essentially created a new paradigm in corporate innovation, one now replicated by companies across Europe and beyond. I love one metaphor Gregor shared during our chat, which is going to be next. As part of our podcast series. He likened corporate startup collaboration to dating. You don't have to marry or invest. Every startup you like. Sometimes dating, meaning piloting, is enough to get the value. Of course, if the relationship blossoms, you can put a ring on it later via acquisition or investment, but only after you have proven the value in practice. This two-stage approach, pilot first, invest later, if needed, is far more efficient and less risky. That insight has spread. We now see many corporates letting their venture client program be the feeder of their VC and M&A deals, especially try before you buy. Gregor's influence is everywhere. He even published a book, aptly titled Buy, Don't Invest. And his most recent firm, 27 Pilots, help organizations implement venture clienting at scale. This is what we also do at Alchemy Crew Ventures, and we only focus on one industry, which is the insurance sector. We will be hearing directly from Gregor in the next upcoming episode, as noted. You won't want to miss his first-hand wisdom and perhaps a few spicy stories about convincing skeptical executives back in the days. Now, let's switch gears to the insurance industry, where the venture client model is making waves. Insurance is traditionally conservative, heavy on compliance, cautious with new tech, un petit peu slow, one might say. But that is exactly why venture clienting is so powerful here. It creates a safe sandbox for insurers to experiment with startups. Two people exemplifying this revolution, Joël Agard at Zurich Insurance and Bassem Ayari at Ergo, a Munich Re's primary insurance arm in Germany, or a Munich Re company. These two are trailblazers, adapting the venture client playbook to large insurers with great success. Joël Agard leads the charge at Zurich, a global insurance giant. Back in 2018, Joël helped launch the Zurich Innovation Championship, and I remember that myself. Initially a global startup competition. I actually judged and evaluated a startup for the Zurich Group at the time in London. Over time, he and his team evolved it into a venture client engine inside Zurich. Please also listen to last year's podcast episode I recorded with Anthony Elliott, who also had been an instrumental execution advocate of the venture client model at Zurich Insurance too. Think of it as Zurich's own startup scouting and adoption machine, and it was a real honor for me to support the deployment of phase one of the model. Joël shared with me that they follow a two-phased approach when I talked to him recently. First, a classical venture client process, laser focus on immediate business problems, what we call Horizon 1 needs. They start with strategic priorities, asking top executives in each region what keeps them awake at night. His team has gotten very good at identifying which problems startups can solve better or faster than building in-house tech. And that is important. It's about outsourcing that deployment and delivery to tech experts, the startups, rather than building in-house capabilities, which at the end of the day may end up becoming much more costly for the corporation. Those challenges then drive a targeted search for the best startup solution out there. They will scout globally, make a long list, short list, and then partner with the one startups that is the best fit for Zurich's problem. It is a very outcome-driven, problem-first process, textbook venture client methodology. I call this a demand-led approach. But Joël didn't stop there. The second phase he runs is like an innovation radar, a more open exploration to keep ears to the ground on emerging trends. This is where the Zurich Innovation Championship still plays a role. They put out calls to startups broadly, not tied to an immediate project, just to see what is out there and to inspire the organization with new ideas. In other words, Joël created a hybrid model. Use venture clienting for core near-term needs and use open scouting challenges to feed long-term innovation. And right now, the Zurich Innovation Group is actually running a hackathon around agentic AI to actually start really understanding how some of those capabilities which are there, developers, much as startups, are solving for agentic AI within the industry. The secret sauce, as Joel calls it, is running, explore, and exploit in harmony. A well-known terminology from the Alex Alston Waters strategizer methodology, balancing the search for future opportunities with execution on today's parties. This harmony between exploring new ideas and exploiting known needs is what keeps Zurich's innovation engine humming. And get this, Zurich has no corporate VC arm at the group level. So everything they do with startups ends up as a venture client relationship or partnership. That means all the effort goes into tangible pilots and deployments, not minority stakes in startups that might not align with the business. It is a bold approach, but clearly paying off. Zurich has run multiple cohorts of its program and engaging hundreds of startups and deploying many solutions. I've been involved with 2.5 of those. In fact, venture clienting at Zurich and other firms is booming so much that it is projected to grow exponentially, forming a multi-billion-dollar market for startup deals in coming years. We will hear more from Joel soon on how he built one of the world's leading venture client programs during a pandemic, no less, and maybe how a Swiss insurance giant adds its own flair to the model. Next, let's talk about Bessem Ayari and the Ergo Scale Up program in Germany. If Joel spearheads venture clienting at a global insurer, Bessem is doing the same at a European / I would say Asia level with Ergo, known for being quite forward-thinking in innovation. Their board member, Mark Klein, is a big advocate. Bessem heads Ergo's startup partnership initiatives and is all about making things happen. One thing I love that Bessem emphasizes is that this is not about innovation theater or chasing the next shiny object. He says, we're not doing fancy startup collaboration. We're really doing problem solving. At the end of the day, we drive impact and we can measure this impact. And this is beautiful. He's passionate that venture client projects must tie to real business KPIs and outcomes. At Ergo, they brand it as the Scale Hub program, as a variant of Scale Up, highlighting that the goal is to scale successful pilots into the enterprise, not just do one and done experiments. Bessem's approach has two customers, the business unit inside Ergo and the startup, the scale-up. He describes his venture client unit's mission as supporting the business owner in getting their problem solved and supporting the startup in navigating Ergo's environment. This dual focus is vital. It means his team acts as a bridge, making sure the startup can integrate in a compliant way. So important in insurance, think legal, security, data privacy checks, and helping the business unit adapt processes to use the new solution. Essentially, Bessem's team babysits the partnership to ensure both sides succeed. And they don't abandon the startup after a pilot. They keep working with those that operationalize their solution, checking in nearly daily to see how things are going. It is a hand-on, high engagement model. Let me give you an example that Bessem shared. Air Doctor. Who doesn't know Air Doctor in the insurance field now? He jokes. Air Doctor is an Israeli health tech startup connecting travelers to local doctors worldwide. A perfect fit for travel insurance. Ergo started a pilot with Air Doctor in Spain a few years ago. proved it out, and now they are scaling that solution to Germany, the UK, and beyond. By being a venture client, Ergo gave Air Doctor a platform to grow. And in return, Ergo's customers get a super convenient service finding doctor abroad via an app. It is a win-win. Bessem noted that working with Air Doctor wasn't always easy. There were moments when folks said, "This is impossible to implement." But the startup team's attitude was, "Impossible? That's not in our vocabulary." I love that. Impossible is not part of my grammar. One founder said, "That is the kind of mindset startups bring. It is infectious inside the corporation, partly the corporate culture." Bessem and his colleagues fed off that energy to push through obstacles, be it compliance hurdles or IT integration issues. Another compelling story from Ergo is Camcom. Camcom is a startup from India specializing in AI-powered visual inspection. With just a smartphone camera, Camcom's tech can scan any surface, a car for instance, and detect damages or defects. Is there a scratch? How deep? What would it cost to fix? They call it Vision AI, and it is perfect for insurance use cases. Imagine car insurance. Traditionally, if you buy a policy in many countries, an agent might physically inspect your car. Or if you have an accident, an adjuster needs to assess damage. Camcom replaces a lot of that with a DIY solution. The customer can just take a video of the car and the AI will spot scratches, dents, cracked windshield, you name it, and even estimate repair costs. That means faster claims, smoother policy underwriting, and less hassle. Ergo first collaborated with Camcom through their Indian JV, HDFC Ergo, and saw great results. Now, they have brought Camcom's founder, Geeta, over to Europe to scale the solution in Ergo's core markets. Talk about acceleration. As Geeta often says, the sky is not the limit, and Ergo seems to agree, expanding Camcom's reach from Asia to Europe. Bessem's team has been introducing Camcoms to Ergo's businesses in the Baltics, Greece, Austria, Germany, basically acting as internal champions, opening doors for the startup like a business development team would do. It is a fantastic example of how a venture client relationship can grow. Start with one pilot, prove value, then scale across geographies. And there are more examples. Bessem mentioned Miss Moneypenny Technologies, a startup from Berlin that turns something as mundane as an insurance card into a digital engagement tool. Their solution puts insurance cards and loyalty passes into Apple Wallet and Google Wallet, creating a new communication channel with customers. In a pilot with RNV, which is another German insurer, they found that having a digital insurance card in your phone wallet keeps customer engaged. They see updates, get push notification for offers, and always have their policy info handy. I promise you, when I look at those engagement numbers, I'm mesmerized by the engagement numbers I see coming from this specific startup called Miss Moneypenny Technology. It is a far cry from the old days, right, of one postal letter a year from your insurer. Miss Moneypenny's success underscores how even conservative insurance players can innovate on customer experience when they team up with startups. What is special in our stories, whether it's Zurich or Ergo, and so on and so forth. If you actually check the podcast, we'll actually find other incredible stories of partnership, is how they overcame the internal barriers. Remember that corporate immune system of bureaucracy and skepticism. Remember that? Well, these trailblazers tamed it. They created fast-track processes. Zurich, for instance, used lighter contracts for pilots, and Ergo provided a lot of internal handholding to meet compliance. They also put a big emphasis on relationships and trust. As I was chatting with Bassem recently, we reflected on the human side. You want to work with people you like and trust, especially when doing something new and tough. That means building personal connections between the startup teams and the corporate folks. Bessem's team actively fosters a community. They have a co-working tech hub called Tech Hub K67 in Düsseldorf, where startups like Camcom work alongside Ergo teams and folks, so everyone learns from each other. He even helps the startups network with other industry executives, especially playing matchmaker so the startup can land more clients. Yes, even outside Ergo. It might sound counterintuitive, right? Why help a startup get other customers? But that abundance mindset actually makes the startup more likely to succeed and stick around. It is clear that for Joël, Bassem, and their peers, venture clienting is not just a process, it is a culture, one of openness, collaboration, and shared wins. And guess what? Whilst I already recorded a podcast episode with Bassem Ayari in November 2024, we are going to get at it again. We are going to hear directly from Joël Garde and Bassem in upcoming episodes. They will share war story, success story, and maybe a peek into their playbooks. I'm personally excited to ask Joël about how he rallied business unit buy-in across so many countries, and to ask Bassem how he measures the impact. He mentioned measurable impact like 10 times, so you know he's got the data. If you're an innovation executive in insurance or any big company, you will want to take notes from these guys. So we have seen the promise of the venture client model, but what about the perils? Like any approach, it's not plug and play perfect. In fact, many companies have tried venture clienting and hit bumps, slow governance, lukewarm internal buy-in, pilots that never scale. It is a classic execution gap, great idea, hard to do well consistently. But fear not, because an evolved venture client model 2.0 is emerging to close those gaps. And we are going to go into more conversation about the venture client model 2.0, looking at some of the works we've done in past months and years. Think of it as the model leveling up with lessons learned. I've been writing about this a lot lately, distilling insights from roundtables and real deployments. Let me share a few insights and ideas. First, my team and I at Alchemy Crew designed a 6-lever framework to ensure a startup engagement succeeds. Fancy name, I know, but it boils down to covering all the bases. Desirability, feasibility, viability, and then usability, visibility, and transferability. If any of those levers is weak, a pilot can stall. In plain language, is the solution desirable, solving a real meaningful problem for us? Is it feasible? Can we practically implement it in our systems and processes? Is it viable? Will it deliver business value and be financially sensible? Is it usable? Will employee or customers actually use it and like it? Is it visible? Do the right people internally know about it, support it, and have ownership? No stealth pilots that no one's accountable for. I also deploy, as part of our framework, external visibility and educational programs. That is part of our Alchemy Crew Media, where I tend to do a little bit more of influencer marketing campaign to actually provide a little bit more awareness, right? Brand awareness about those programs. And is it transferable? Can we scale it beyond a small pilot to other departments or markets? These 6 factors or levers act like a pre-flight checklist for venture client projects, ensuring nothing critical is overlooked. For example, focusing on desirability from day one means you choose startup solution that business units truly want and need, not just something the innovation team finds cool. That prevents the dreaded scenario of a pilot ending and the business saying, meh, not a priority for us. Similarly, planning for transferability early means you design pilots in a way that if they work, you can roll them out smoothly across business units, departments, functions, but also other geographies, often by involving an enterprise architect or scaling team early. Next, beyond these levers, we identify 5 strategic enhancements to upgrade venture client programs. I would like to call them the power hubs for venture client model 2.0, and we actually dive into those right now. So I won't do a textbook dump here, but here is a tester. Fast track governance. This means creating special fast lanes for startup procurement, legal, and compliance. For instance, use a one-page pilot contract and NDA, set up a pre-approved sandbox for IT testing, and appoint what I call innovation ombudsman. Friendly folks in legal IT who can sign off quickly on low-risk trials. The message is innovation projects get to skip the queue within reason. Some companies even worked with regulators to change rules so they could onboard startups faster. Talk about commitment. Fast track governance is basically saying, yes, we are a big bank, a big insurer with lots of rules, but for these small pilots, we will temporarily relax some rules to move at the startup speed. It is huge. Then, business unit skin in the game. The idea here is to bake startup adoption into the business unit's own goals. For example, give business unit leaders innovation OKRs and KPIs, number of startup solutions implemented, time from pilot to production, etc. Even tie parts of their budget or bonuses to specific successful innovation. When a business owner knows they are accountable for making that pilot succeed and will get credit for it, they lean in a lot more. One company I talked to literally requires the business unit to co-fund any pilot, even if it is just 20% of the cost. That small monetary commitment ensures they are serious. No more pilots run in a vacuum, but an innovation team alone. It is our pilot together with the enterprise or the business. Then, bridge funding for scale. Often a pilot succeeds but then stalls because who pays for scaling it? So another announcement is setting up a venture client fund earmarked for scaling projects, not to invest in equity, but to invest in implementation. Maybe X million dollar internal fund managed by innovation that can be used to roll out a startup solution to multiple business units or countries. Essentially, put money aside to carry good pilot into full deployment. This tackles the gap where everyone loved the pilot, but the business unit's annual budget didn't account for scaling it. With a central fund, you can say pilot validated. Here's the funding to integrate and scale it. I've seen this turn would-be zombie pilots into enterprise-wide success story, actually. Then, Startup Trust Index. This one is a bit provocative and new. We propose companies measure and publicize how startup friendly they are, and we'll see how we can make this happen as well, based on some of the initiatives we are going to run between 2025 and 2026. Think of it like a scorecard. How fast do we pay startups? How fair are our contracts? What percent of pilots turns into real deployments? Would founders recommend working with you? If you had a high scale-up or startup trust score, like an NPS score, it becomes a bragging right. Startups will flock to you. If your score is low, it shines a light on where to improve. Maybe your legal terms are scaring off the best startups. Really good startup will not pay attention to those. They will just move on. It is a radical transparency idea to combat what we call adverse selection. As good startup avoid corporations that are too painful to work with, I imagine a future where a startup can check a Fortune 500 company's rating like we check restaurant reviews. Not far-fetched, some VC firms and accelerators informally share such info already. But Venture Client 2.0 is about making that a strategic metric and priority. And then dedicate or provide a dedicated scaling guild. Yes, a scaling guild. Finally, one more power up form, a cross-functional SWAT team that owns the scaling of pilots. This would include IT architects to integrate tech, change managers to train people and drive adoption, procurement and compliance folks to formalize vendor relationships smoothly, and so on. Basically, a task force whose only job is to turn the successful pilot into a fully adopted solution. Too often, once a pilot works, everyone high five and then nothing happens because implementation is thrown over the wall to a normal operational team that isn't prepared or motivated. A scaling guild bridge that last mile. They take the battle and run the relay from pilot to enterprise rollout. As Bessem put it, execution is key. Aligning everyone on the goal and going in the same direction is critical. A team dedicated to execution ensures that alignment. Each of these announcements addresses a specific shock point in today's venture client efforts. Together, they kind of re-architect the corporate startup interface, turning bottlenecks into flywheels, as I like to say. Venture Client Model 2.0 isn't about throwing out the original idea. It is about supercharging it so that it consistently delivers results, even in the face of corporate inertia. It is the difference between dabbling in a couple of pilots versus making startups a core engine of your strategy. I truly see this as a movement taking shape. Corporates are learning to behave more like venture capitalists in terms of speed and risk-taking, while still leveraging their strength, being the big customer that can propel a startup to succeed. When done right, the corporation wins faster innovation, solved problems, competitive edge, and the startup wins revenue validation and scale. That is the win-win promise we want to realize more widely. We will be unpacking this idea through the series, so drop us a line if there's any specific you want to talk about or want us to investigate. In later episode, I will likely chat about the 6 levers and strategic enhancement with some of our guests. For instance, asking someone like Joel how Zurich fast-tracks governance, or asking experts like Gregor about the concept of a startup-friendly index. And I am sure the startup founders we feature will have opinions on what makes a corporate a great corporate, or not so great client. So stay tuned for those insightful discussions. Wow. I cannot believe it. We have covered so much for this kickoff session, from Gregor Gimi's light bulb moment at BMW, to Joel Agard scaling the model at Zurich, to Bassem Ayari making it sing at Ergo, a real startup like Camcom, Miss Moneypenny, and Air Doctor changing the game. It is clear the venture client model is more than a buzzword. It is practical. Its evolving approach is defining the way we drive results right now in the corporate world. The venture client model matters because it marries the best of both worlds, the agility of startups with the scale of enterprises. It is turning big companies into fast movers and giving startups the ultimate gift, a big reference customer and revenue. As one report I read kept, if even 10% of Fortune 500 companies fully embrace venture clienting, it could unlock $5 billion market for startup deals each year. And beyond the dollars, it could transform how we all experience innovation, from how we file insurance claim to how we get medical help abroad to how our cars get serviced. These aren't sci-fi scenarios, they are happening as we speak. But you might be thinking, Sabine, this sounds great, but is it really that smooth? Of course, every innovation journey has bumps. That is why we are dedicating this series to dig deep, ask the tough question, and learn from those who are making it work. As noted, coming up in the next episode, you will hear from Gregor Gimi himself. He will join me to share how he sees Venture Client 2.0 develop, and maybe what he's up to after evangelizing this model for years. We will have the brilliant Joel Agard walk us through Zurich's program. I'm curious to learn how they handle cultural change in such a large organization. And I will definitely ask him about that secret sauce of balancing explore versus exploit. The program started over, well, I would say 4 years ago, and I was very fortunate to actually enable and help the team with the first accelerator, and then develop the capabilities for it to become what it is today. We'll also be speaking with Bassem Ayari and the Ergo team, plus some of their scale-up partners. I'm particularly excited for you to meet founders like Geetha from Camcom, Mark from Miss Moneypenny Technologies, or in the future, Ilya from Air Doctor, who can give the startup's perspective. What did the corporate do that helped? What was painful? And how did the partnership propel their growth? This narrative will bring the model to life, I promise you, with real voice and candid insight. Remember, we are dealing with the venture client model, venture being a startup, the client being the corporate, and we are sticking to doing that within the B2B or business to business world. So if you are an innovation scout, a startup founder, or just a curious executive with a French love of nuance and strategy, stick with us. We will blend education with a bit of entertainment. Call it infotainment, à la venture client. I promise high energy conversation, genuine stories, success and failures, and actionable takeaways you can bring to your own organization. We will also keep it honest. This isn't a sales pitch for venture clienting. It is a critical exploration of its evolution, and this evolution is super critical for regulated industries, in particularly finance and insurance. By the end of this series, you will know the ins and outs of the model, from big picture strategy down to on-the-ground tips like why having a one-page startup contract can save you months of headaches, or why impossible should be banished from your vocabulary. Are you ready to scout for growth in a whole new way? I know I am. In our next episode, we officially kick off the journey with Gregor Gimi, the godfather of venture clienting. You will definitely want to hear how a concept which is born within a car maker's garage is now influencing boardrooms worldwide. Until then, I will leave you with a theoretical teaser. What if your company's next breakthrough isn't built, but bought? Think about it and join me next time on Scouting for Growth to find out how the venture client model is making that a reality. Merci beaucoup for listening. Thank you very much. And à bientôt. See you soon. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Scouting for Growth. Please subscribe, share with friends, and leave a 5-star rating. Your rating is so valuable. I review all of them, and my team help me adapt content to meet your needs. Also, connect with me on my preferred channels. I am a B2B growth expert, so you will find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Threads, and X as well as Blue Sky. All information available below. Until next, keep scouting for growth.